Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy. Do you want to reduce the amount of road noise you hear in your car beyond a stage 1 into a full stage 2? I'll show you how. All right, guys, let's talk about this project a little bit and the reasons why you're going to want to do this yourself. Now, I hope you got a chance to see my stage 1 in this car, so it'll all make sense. Now, stage 1 was wavy foam, Soundskins Pro, and speaker rings through both front doors. It really does make a difference, but the moment you start cutting sound, you can start hearing it from other places where you couldn't just describe it all before. It was all there. So now, when the doors are done and you have that more insulation on either side of you, you start to hear it through the floor, you start to hear it behind you. And the best way to take care of that is my Stage 2 Soundskins Pro through the entire cabin bowl, including the trunk. Now, road noise sucks. There's no way around it. So I love the sound of my car. I love my exhaust. I can hear my intakes, all these different sort of things. But road noise, other cars that your tire hiss, the surface of the road, that's no fun, and it also cuts down on the quality of your stereo. I have an upgraded system in this, and it's getting drowned out by road noise. So the best way to fix this is the Stage 2. Now, we're gonna jump in, and one of the very first places we're gonna start is in the trunk, so let's get started there. All right, also starting kind of from the back forward for a couple of different reasons. First of all, this is just a great place to start. So you start to learn how to work with the material and in the Soundskins Pro, but then also as we work forward in the front cabin, we're going to be pulling the post on our negative post on our battery because we're going to be unplugging the seats. Never, ever, ever unplug your seats without pulling the post on your battery. You'll probably end up with an airbag warning that is very difficult to clear and will probably take the dealership. So, go ahead and get a tape measure. Just measure this distance. I'll grab it, but I wanted to show the work first. Then also, a couple of things about here in the trunk. Now, your battery position, depending on where it is very frequently over here on the right. In this particular car, it's right here dead center in the middle. So as we look in this bowl area, there is some opportunity here on the sides and down underneath to put in some sound matting, but we're not going to do this whole thing. So we're not going to take the battery out. We're just going to cut down on this space on the side walls here and all across this back portion. All right, but go ahead and grab your tape measure and let's go ahead and measure out this first piece. And I'm going to walk through applying the Soundskins Pro material. All right, so this initial piece is 32 inches wide by 16 deep. Now, a couple of things that you're going to want to do here. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to take this material and I'm going to flip that up a little bit because I'm going to go down that ridge right there, just like that. So that'll fit in really, really nicely. Now, as I always do in these projects, I'm probably the only one that cares. I always lay the material down the same direction, right? So this is kind of setting the orientation for the entire car. I'm going to do it in this orientation. Maybe that's just me. But when you cut this, and I've got the big roll of Soundskins Pro, I've got a leftover cut. So this was 16. So I've got enough material here to go ahead and place in material here as well. So go ahead and peel this off. Now, if you didn't watch the Stage 1, so you're not used to working with this yet, you just take the material, peel back the backing, and in big pieces like this, I usually will pull the entire thing, just like that, as I know I'm off camera. So then you take it, now this has this kind of cloth piece right here. I'm gonna take it and walk it up, even it out really nicely, and I want it to go down this ridge back here. So I'm gonna lay it down so it comes down this ridge really nicely, like that. There we go. And seeing that cloth piece will even go right back down in its place. Then go ahead and take your roller, go ahead and roll all of this out, make sure it sticks down really, really nicely. And then we're going to cut a piece now for this next section. So for this back piece, you notice that this line here isn't straight. And again, these are all just building your skills as you work through to work with this material. So this top edge can be straight, but you press it back here to meet this curved edge, which will cause some of the edges to curve up. That's perfect because then this material you can easily mark. So I just set it up here and I marked it with that curve as it kind of came up and away. So now I've got a nice even line of how to customize that edge to fit in here just perfectly. Okay, so go ahead and cut this, peel off the back and get this piece set. And then we're gonna start dealing with some of the scrap that we lay down this edge and down inside the bowl here. So the back piece is in and the little side pieces are in, and you're going to get really good at working with scrap. So anytime that you have like a big piece of scrap left over, don't throw it away, because you're going to end up using it in small little stretches like this or around curves and that sort of thing. Same thing in this curve. So I don't want to take the battery out. I don't want to interfere with any of that. But you can see this is a big, good open space right here with all this just bare sheet metal straight through to the bottom of the car. So a couple of things you can do. You can take one solid piece, come around that curve. So measure the depth. So what's the depth here? The depth is roughly 6.5 inches. So you're going to want a 6.5 inch wide strip, and then take your tape measure and curve it around that bend, right? There's a flat surface here too. I'd probably have them two separate pieces. I probably wouldn't try to lay one piece all the way around. So I'd put one piece here, do the same thing, measure, right? And then do the same thing for this side. Now, be careful with your primary ground right here. I'm not going to pull up the ground. I might put some Soundskins right there in between those two pieces to help kill that space as well. But that same kind of around the bend measure. So your width of the piece around the bend measure. You can use your scrap. You can also fill in right here too. So we can basically close up most of the battery box and have it be substantially quieter. Starting in the trunk is great, like I said, a great way to develop your skills here as you work with the material. You can see it slowly piecing together. I got this curve here. I have this back wall now here. I've got this curve here. Now, if you have any cables like this that are on these little plastic posts, right? Just push them straight through the material. If you have to, cut a little hole or punch a little hole in it. So the cables will all still be in the same place. There's another one right here that I'm going to pull out here in a second. There was one over here as well that I've punched through the material. And then I'm also going to cut some irregular shapes, kind of square-ish with rounded edges to go on either side here as well. And then the trunk will just be about done. Now, a couple of things, just in case you're thinking about the sidewalls. Now, I often don't do it simply for the reason that there are so many strange angles and so much wiring that runs through either side that I find that it's kind of diminishing returns. I usually will do the floor of the trunk because most of the sound is radiating up, from the road up through the floor of your car. So I do tend to leave these alone, and I'm going to do that in this case. So just don't be surprised by that. All right. You can do that if you pull the carpet and so on. If you really want to be thorough, or if, say, for example, you're rebuilding a car entirely, you're down to bare metal, I absolutely would. But in this case, it's just not worth the trouble when you look back behind there and you look at the amount of wiring harnesses and other issues. Now, the one thing you could do if you wanted, you could line the roof of the trunk. I've thought about that, and I've certainly done it in the past. I'm not going to in this case because the majority of sound is going to be coming through the floor, so I'm not going to do the roof. So we're going to finish up this trunk base all around the battery, and then we're going to move forward into the back seat. All right, one last look in the trunk here before we move forward up into the back seat. So as you can see, it's all laid out, and in the battery bowl, looks really good. Now, I have not pulled the ground post on the battery yet because, at least in this car's case, we want to run the seats forward. So the seats are run forward so we can get better access to the back. Now, like a lot of BMWs, I'd say probably about 75% of them, the back seat in this case comes up by simply grabbing and pulling. So pull up on both sides, go ahead and take your back seat and feed it out. So once you have your back seat out, you're gonna wanna start moving and lifting this carpet to get to the bare metal underneath. It's looped like this. The top carpet, pull up, get the loop from underneath it, and it'll start to pull up. Now, in addition, when I use the plastic trim tool, there's a big flat plastic rivet that goes through on both sides that will prevent this from going all the way up like that. So go ahead and pull those rivets on both sides, and then find a good way just to hold this up somehow. I usually use like a bungee cord around the headrest or something, because we're gonna wanna cover all of this metal space all the way across. And then we'll deal with our fuel pump right over there once we get there. We're gonna cut access for that, but we'll deal with that. But go ahead and get this all up. Now, the other thing you can do, I usually will measure right to the edge of this top surface. So I'll measure flat straight across, down the bowl, across, and to right here. That way, because the pieces that come up here are going to come up the wall here, and they'll meet right here at this top edge. So flat surface to wall surface, So measure that all out, start laying the material out. I try to do it in one big long strip the best I can. And then if you have to, cut multiple pieces. So I'll get part of it cut and I'll show you what it looks like. But this really is just cut and stick as you go. So the base measurements of this are basically 46 inches across by about 18 inches deep. And granted, it's a curved surface, so as you measure it, make sure to measure for those curves. Now, this is where you're going to start to customize as this goes. Now, these latches, I usually cut and give some extra room around these latches, because if you're right up on top of them, I've noticed in a couple of cars that then the seat, which apparently the clearance is very, very small, so you want to make sure that your back seat will lock down nicely. So I tend to cut around those. So what I'll do is I'll dry fit this in place. As you can see, as it kind of sits awkwardly right now, but it's measured to go at this front edge right here. So I'm going to dry fit it into place, measure and mark with a pencil where my cutouts are, where my cutout is in the middle, where I start to hit this back edge. So I'll probably curve this away a little bit. Under the seat belt, you can get under it a little bit. So go ahead but give it a little bit of a notch here as well. So you can get under part of it, but it's not going to flush up completely. So just give a little bit of a notch. So dry fit the entire piece into place and then mark everything. Now, in addition, we talked about your fuel tank. So that big black cap is your low pressure fuel pump and access to your fuel tank. So what you're going to want to do is leave that cut out. So what I usually will do is I will lay this across, and then I'll find where the fuel tank is and I'll cut a circle, and then the disc of sound materials I'll put back on, but it's cut out around it in case I ever need to take that off. I won't have to try to cut it after the fact and worry about cutting wires or doing anything like that. Now, as well, if you pull your seat up and you find garbage or debris, clean that up first. Make sure that this is nice and clean, so when you set this down, it sits down well. Like I said, I'm going to go under the lead edge of the carpet here and then slot it all down into place. It's okay if it covers those wires. I just want to make sure I can access the low pressure fuel tank or low pressure fuel pump right there if I have to. So cut that circle in the material before you put it on. All right, so the back piece is in. As you can see, I haven't rolled it out yet. I've got my roller sitting right there. Use a roller whenever you can. The edges of the material can be sharp sometimes because of that thin layer of aluminum in the material that can cut your finger if you're not careful. So go ahead and use the roller, roll all of this out. As you can see, I cut out my fuel pump, and I've got the disc that's sitting right there that I'll roll out as well. And then this last bit of back section here, basically this could be 3 rectangles, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to measure it out, just roughly measure, because we're going to have to cut around the loops for the seat. That different size shape right there in the middle. We have to cut that curve just a little bit, and then over there. So you can measure out rectangular shapes and then just have a pair of scissors and just customize them to fit that space and roll it out. Then at that point, we're going to be moving up to the front cabin bowl next. But go ahead and get this all finished up, and then we're going to talk about taking off your negative battery post, taking out your seats, and dealing with the cabin bowl. All right, y'all, so to get to the rest of the cabin bowl, we're going to need to take our seats out. But as I mentioned before, we still have the negative post on our battery because we want to be able to move the seats forward and back, up and down. Now, my seat is as far forward and up as far as it can be, so I can get to the T50 bolt right here. So it's a T50 Torx bolt on both sides that you can see. And then there's 2 in the front as well. So what you're going to want to do is run the seat forward, take out the rears, run the seat back as far, to the middle position at least, if not all the way back to get to the 2 fronts, and do that on both sides. Now, the other advantage the M2 has that a lot of BMWs don't is that the seat belt is not actually physically attached to the seat, which is nice. So when we take these out, we can take them out entirely. But before you do that, we're going to have to unplug the seats from underneath. I'll show you what that plug looks like, but you do not unhook your seats when the car still has power. Okay, so go ahead and get those 4 bolts out on both sides, get your seats centered right about in the middle, and then we're going to talk about pulling the battery and unplugging your seats. So once all 4 bolts on each seat are taken out, you're going to want to come back here to the trunk, which I'm going to point out something extra here in just a second. But take a 10mm socket, loosen this nut, and go ahead and pull your ground post off and tuck it down pull it off your ground post and tuck the cable down where it won't accidentally come back up and touch. This is so we avoid airbag warnings and other issues off the seats, because that is a big deal. Now, you may notice one difference here in the trunk. Now, remember when we started here in the trunk, I put this full sheet of Soundskins in, which also covered your comfort access sensor right here. Now, in multiple BMWs, I've not had an issue with it. I've covered those sensors before and have not had any signal issues. Now, I did notice here in my M2 that as soon as I covered that sensor, my comfort access, you know, where you touch the door handle, stopped working. So all I did was come back here to the trunk, very, very carefully cut out a section around it, avoided any cables to make sure I didn't hit those. Just cut out a section and then it went right back to normal. So double check that functionality when you're doing this work. If you have to, go ahead and just uncover your comfort access sensor here in the trunk and it'll go back to working. All right, let's go back up into the main cabin. Now that your negative post is off, we look underneath here and you'll see you have a big yellow plug. So your typical BMW horseshoe style collar. You depress the center tab and then rock that back. And then you can walk this plug out entirely. So now your seat's completely loose and you can take it and pull it out of the car. Be really careful when you do so. You don't want to scuff up your door sill or anything about your seats themselves. So they are a little heavy, a little bottom heavy. Pick them up gently, take them out, set them aside on both sides. And then we're going to talk about how we get our carpet pulled up next. All right, so here we are on the driver's side. And while you know, taking your seats out can be a little bit of a hassle, I do like the opportunity to clean underneath my seats. So I'm going to vacuum before I do anything else. But you now can see your subwoofer cover here. These are 4T20, so go ahead and take that out, take this cover off. You have to take your door sill plastic off. This is going to lift up and off. It also connects back here at the back. For the M2, there's a little tab that it locks into. So I always lift from the front, work my way down, and then pull it off where this back plastic will hook out away from this trim here. Because what we want to do is we want to be able to lift this carpet up to the best of our ability. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to pull my pedals, because that is more trouble than it's worth. And we're also going to see what's underneath the carpet, because sometimes there are foam blocks and some other pieces. But most importantly, out of all of this, if anything else, getting Soundskins under your subs here make a huge difference. Now, side note, if you haven't upgraded your speaker system, now's a good time to do it, because you're going to have all these pieces out. But so take the trim off, get this cover off, and we're going to walk through the rest. So once you have this plastic off, a couple of things to note here. So the plastic, these little plugs that help hold that plastic trim piece in place, usually stay behind. So you can tell in my case, you'll just take a pair of pliers and pull those out later. Don't worry about them now. In addition, you have your seatbelt bolt that comes down right here to the carpet. We'll need to take that out so we can actually pull the carpet up on this side. That is also a T50. Go ahead and back that off. And I'm just going to let it sit here and hang, so that's good to go. So once you have that set, you can take your cable, pull it through the split in the carpet, and you can start to pull the carpet up here, as you can tell. Now, what we're going to have is we're going to take our subwoofer out first. Now, your rear vent tube just comes off, so go ahead and take that out, set it aside, and you can start to pull the carpet up. Now, as you can see, this is why your car is loud. You do have some foam backing here in the carpet itself. I think this is mainly for insulation. It really has nothing to do with sound, though it might have a little bit of side benefits there. So your subwoofer here, again, great time to upgrade while you're here, has two 10 millimeter nuts here and here. Pull those out, undo the plug right here, and then the wire itself are on these little plastic retaining posts right here. Now, I know the other side has a couple of additional ones that go down the body right here. But so go ahead and take like a plastic trim tool or something and pull these up, because we're going to be laying Soundskins through here. So just pull those nuts and this piece will come up and out once you unplug it. And then we're going to start to peel the carpet back. We'll talk about that more once we get to it. The carpet here on the M2 peels back really, really nicely here to your center console. I don't see any reason to take the center island or center console out. The amount of effort that takes is extremely high for a strip here that's probably about 4 inches wide. So we're not going to cover the transmission tunnel entirely with Soundskins, that top surface. That just, the level of effort to do that is really diminishing returns, so I don't do it. But you can see now this whole cabin bowl all the way up to basically the middle of your seat. This is why it's so loud, guys. All this bare metal all this bare exposed metal. So this is where you're gonna start to measure and cut. So what I will usually do is I will measure down the tunnel wall. So take your tape measure, lay it down, and lay it across. So that's one contiguous sheet all the way across right here. I usually do not cover these center struts. Also, do not cover your islands where your seats bolt down. Don't come over the top of those at all. I do not mess with your seat bolts. I want my seats to sit down flush and appropriately. So these will be left as islands behind. So I cut rectangular sheets. So measure down and across from here to here. I do the same thing here. This will be one straight sheet down this wall. So I measure from here to here, there to there. When I come up with those measurements, I then lay my sheet into the space. I mold it around the shape, and then I'll mark with a pencil. I'll mark with a pencil where these islands will be for the seat bolts and get it all nice and measured out. Then I cut it out to custom fit. This isn't hard. This isn't hard work at all. It's just measuring and cutting and laying it out really, really nicely and then rolling it out once it's there. Now, before I forget, one additional thing. You're able to duplicate this work. This shape and this shape and this shape are all the same on the other side. So when you measure these out, cut out two sets of this, two sets of this, two sets of this. That way, you already have templates for the other side, and the other side's gonna go even faster. Okay, so grab your tape measure, start on this piece, because that's really kind of the easiest place to start. I'll talk about going around some of these brackets and under your heater tube and so on. But start on this space first, measure it out down the wall here and across, and cut out this big rectangle with another one for the other side. So the first piece is cut, and like I said, I cut duplicates on both sides. I measured 29 inches by 15 across, and now I've just dry fitted into place. And you can see I just dry fit it around the little islands where the seats go. I run it up the transmission wall right there. It fits in really, really nicely. So what I'm going to do now is I just simply kind of mold it against this shape, and I'm going to take a pencil and just draw out. I could potentially come up and over the top right here, but I'm not going to. So I'm just going to leave these islands alone on both sides. So I'm going to cut out around them, just use a pencil and scissors and just cut around here, and then it's just going to be a matter of peeling and sticking. I'll probably start on this side first because that's going to be the hardest side to work with. So I'll peel back on the top edge, kind of fit it up in here, get a nice clean fit across here on the top, and then work my way down and across all the way to this side. If I have to, I can trim back this edge just a little bit, but up that wall right there is not going to hurt anything. It's not going to really get in the way because it's going to lay down really nicely. So go ahead and take this and cut it out, lay it out, and then we're going to keep working on the pieces. So get that first piece all laid out. Make sure to use your roller. This is really important. Make sure that you get down into the gaps, that it lays down really nicely, and it will stick down. So just make sure you get good adherence all the way down. So now go ahead and measure your centerpiece and your back wall. We're going to do the back wall first. Now, if you notice, there's a big air gap right here. So when you lay this piece in, you could potentially just come flat all the way across. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. Or you could potentially put a split in the material and lay it back down this metal. So I'm probably going to come down, and then I'll put in a cut that will allow the piece to lay down into this gap a little bit, because again, we're about muting this metal. The air gap itself won't hurt anything. So we want to mute and quiet all of this metal and cut any sound coming through there. But again, you can understand why our cars are so loud. So this piece back here, go ahead and measure it. We're going to lay it in the same piece. We're going to have to take a rectangular piece, lay it down and flare the edges so you can cut these curves. The top line is going to be straight, so just lay the piece in, measure and mark your curves, and then cut off that extra so it fits this space really nicely. Okay, so go ahead and get this done, and then we're going to do the center channel next. All right, so the back wall is done. As you can see, it's split around this kind of open void space right here. Now, you could potentially, let me turn my light a little bit. So you could potentially fill in some of this space with scrap. This sidewall right here, I am tempted to fill in. Very frequently, I don't come up the sidewall, but this is such a long, tall sidewall. I'm probably going to put a strip of scrap right here. Same thing, you just measure end to end and cut out a rectangular piece and fit it in right there. You could also even extend it. If I measured up into this void space right here, I could run down this wall and up into the void space a little bit. Because again, you want to cover as much of this metal as possible. But the cutout for the bowl went really well. I've rolled it down really nicely, and it comes up the transmission wall right there. Now, before mentioning it, before I potentially forget, because we can get to this top piece right here of the transmission wall, or transmission tunnel, excuse me, without having to pull the center console, I will pull the carpet up enough. When I pull it up equally from both sides, I can get this top strip exposed, and I'll put in a kind of rectangular square piece right here on top of this. Because again, you can see all this open space where sound's gonna come up and through from the road, your transmission, your tires, everything else. All right, so moving to the center section, same thing. Just measure across, it's gonna be 29. It was 12 across if I remember correctly. When I do the dry fit, I fit it underneath the heating duct here. And then what I will do is you can do one of two things. You can just put a split in the material, so when you fit it down over the top of this, the material splits around it, and then you can cut out kind of an oblong shape to fit around this bracket, because this is where your subwoofer is going to go back down. Your subwoofer box does sit down completely against the metal. So obviously we're going to be putting a sheet of material between this and the metal, so it's going to sit up just a little bit more than normal. But it hooks in, it's got feet right here that hook in, and we press it down and we put those nuts back on, it'll fit back in just fine. And you're going to be, this is one of the biggest changes right here. I mean, this is one of the biggest changes. This is where suddenly all of your subwoofer is going to be coming upwards instead of diffusing down into the metal. Okay, so dry fit, again, measure, dry fit. You go from this support beam to that support beam and across, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so this side is close to done. We're about 2/3 done. Now this is where you're gonna wanna use a little bit of your scrap. So obviously I've got a bit of a gap here. There's no reason not to cover that down to basically the seat bracket right here. I'm gonna come down in a rectangle. I'm also gonna cut a long rectangular strip to go down this sidewall right here and potentially fill into that void space back there a little bit. Okay, so go ahead and finish this section up. And then we're gonna talk about up under the footwell itself. All right, so let's look at this front footwell section. Now, on the driver's side, it's kind of inconvenient to take this corner plastic off because of your hood pull, so I tend to not do it. What I'll do is I'll bow the carpet up, as you can see, and there's plenty of opportunity here for sound matting. It's not going to be the entire space because you have your heating duct here, which I'm not going to take out, and you have this big wiring harness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a square piece, fit it into that kind of triangular shape essentially, and cut it down to fit that space. Now potentially way up here at the front, you could even get some here up underneath the front as well. That's gonna be kind of a rectangular strip. And then you've got this foam block. Now what I will usually do, and I've got a wiring harness that's in the way right now, but I will usually pull this foam block out. This wiring harness is on a plastic post right here, you can just pull off. I will pull this foam block out as well and get underneath that and then put this foam block back in. Again, this foam block is just to fill the space so your carpet is even. It doesn't really do anything for insulation or sound matting or dampening. It's just to fill the space so you don't, this surface feels even for your feet. Okay, so go ahead and pull all that out, measure and cut, measure and cut, measure and cut. All right, y'all, so let me gap the carpet back up so you can see what I've done here. So I've got it all across that front part. I've got it under this foam block, kind of curving around the air duct here. I've got it back in this corner, up the transmission tunnel, really about as good as it's going to be on the side considering all of the obstacles in the way. So with all of that done, you're pretty much done on this side. Now, the passenger side is going to be a little bit different because you won't have the pedals, so you'll probably be able to get this front carpet up a little bit further, and you'll cut the shapes just a little bit differently. That air duct is there, though, so it's going to be similar, but you're going to have a little bit more ladderability with the carpet. Now, the other side is going to be exactly the same, so I'm not going to walk you through it because there's no point, because we're just going to repeat what we're doing here. So I'm going to go finish the other side. You should go do the same. And then I'm going to walk you through putting the car back together. All right, also it's time to put everything back together. Now I've done the other side already with the seat in place, but not bolted down because obviously I need to move it back and forth. It's plugged in, but I don't have the battery connected until this seat is connected. So the very first thing you want to do is put your sub back in. If need be, you have to cut back the sound matting along this wall just a little bit to make sure that this side flushes down just fine. But it's just a matter of just tipping it back into place and then tipping it back down onto the two posts right here, which are those 10mm posts, to make sure that those snug down really, really nicely, and then lay the carpet back down into place. Once the carpet's down, you'll slot the cable through this little slot in the carpet and through the hole. You'll put the heater vent duct back through this hole, and it'll all lay down really, really nicely. Now, it may sit up just a little bit higher than normal. That's to be expected with the sound matting in place, but it should fit all back in without any problems at all. So go ahead and lay your carpet back down really, really nicely after you get your sub in, and then we're gonna get our trim back on, and we're gonna work to get the seat back in. So once you have your sub back in, again, make sure to get your heater tube back in. Push it back till it clicks, kind of fits over the other pipe, and you don't want that loose and the heat bleeding out underneath the carpets. Doesn't do your passengers any good. Go ahead and reconnect your seat belt. I cut a little bit of space around the Soundskins for the bolt hole right here, so it goes in nice and cleanly, this being such an important bolt, kind of like your seat bolts, right? I don't cover those or mess with those in any way. That's that T50, just like your seat bolts. Go ahead and put your subscreen back on with those T20s all the way around, and then go ahead and do your door trim. Remember, if you have those white plastic posts, pull those out and put them back onto the bottom of the trim. This side goes in first, and then it lays down nicely, and that will all be set. And then at that point, it'll be just getting your seat back in. All right, y'all, so one last look here really quickly. Everything is all back together. Back seats in, carpets in. I need to get my floor mats in. But everything is bolted down and set and ready to go. So good job. Go ahead and clean up, put your tools away. You're all done. All right, y'all, all done. Go ahead and clean up and put your tools away. And this is not a hard project. It just takes some time. Really being thorough to walk through all of the surfaces you can reasonably get to through your car. And it really does make a measurable difference. Now, if you're wondering how much of a difference did it make sure to check out my comparison video where I laid out this car OEM, Stage 1, and now Stage 2. So you can see the arc of the difference that these materials make in your car. Now, one of the things that's really hard to measure in all of this is like I mentioned, is getting Soundskins underneath your subs. That makes a big difference. It makes them much punchier. My road noise measurement isn't going to capture that, but I've noticed every car that I've done, I've put Soundskins underneath the subs, and they immediately get more full, more rich, and more punchy. I love that. So the differences this makes, not only for your quality of life in your car, cutting down on that road noise hiss, but also improves your stereo system as well. So make sure to check out that comparison video, because I wanted to walk you through the DIY in this. Thank you to Soundskins for making such a fantastic product. I love working with their stuff, and you should make sure to do the same. Everything you need will be linked in the video description below, so make sure to check that out. Now, while you're there, please click like and subscribe. It makes a genuine difference to my channel, and I would truly appreciate it. That way you also get notifications of upcoming events, new DIYs, new model reviews, lots of things coming up. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you on my next project.